let's see what happens with the election, eh? See how things go. Could get interesting theoretically once the we'll see how this challenge goes with the leader of the Conservatives. I'm less familiar with domestic policy and manoeuvring than international stuff. Oh, that's right, we've got to click the button. So I don't have a complete political plan about how to get this one. But we'll do what we can. Let's see if we can figure it out. Alright, will of the state. What are we up to? Turn 9. Cranking through them. Alright. Geopolitico. World leaders to gather at Alliance of Nations. Calling for a session on the current affairs, world leaders will be gathering at the Alliance of Nations next week. The main highlights with the upcoming agenda were announced as expected. They will be around the current issues in Eastern Merkapa. In addition to the member states from the region, President Walker and Chairman Malenev will be delivering their speeches at the Assembly. All eyes will turn to Constantium, Beirut, as the historic session will be taking place in the Alliance of Nations headquarters. Oh yeah? Alright, could get spicy. Could be a nothing burger too though. Could be like the United Nations, right? Okay. Schedule for the Alliance of Nations session. We have received the schedule for the upcoming Alliance of Nations session. According to the dates outlined, Swordland 1 is being prepared for the flight to Constantium, Beirut. Minister of Foreign Affairs, David Vishy, will be attending the session as well as accompanying Mr. President on the flight. Righto, Alliance of Nations, well that was quick. I, David Vishy, and the rest of the Swordish delegation of the Alliance of Nations arrived in Beirut. The local police escorted us to the Alliance's headquarters in downtown Constantium, immediately recognisable by its gleaming dome. On entering the building, we were met with a parliamentary guide who briefed us about the procedures. After a strict security screening, the staff ushered us to the 3rd floor. We entered the massive circular assembly hall and our designated seats. David sat next to me. All of the world's most powerful people under one gleaming dome. It's amazing how someone has managed to fill a room with people that absolutely loathe each other. Truly astounding, humanity has come so far. How are you feeling, Anton? Ever since what happened to Peter, I'm amazed that you've been holding up so well. I've seen you two hanging around all the time in university. We knew changing Swordland is hard, but we could never expect it to be this way. I managed somehow. He was a true friend. I hope that he's in a better place now. He has been more of a friend to me than I could have ever been to him. I wish I had done more to help him. That's truth. It's tough to be the president, making harsh decisions and dealing with their consequences. I wish I could have supported you more, but time has been a cruel mistress. Ain't that the case? Your advice wasn't that good anyway. Harsh. What you've done is far more than enough. Don't treat yourself so harshly. From the distance, you could see the President of the General Assembly, Mr. Nines, approaching his designated position. Well, the session is about to start. Let's get comfortable. It's going to be a long day. Mr. Nines opened the session with a short speech and called the first speaker to the floor. It's my great pleasure to invite the Prime Minister of Lesbia to address the Assembly. Patricio Alvarez stood and walked up to the podium as the Assembly applauded. Mr. President, it is my pleasure to return to this podium. Let's see how crazy this year's session will get. I'm surprised he isn't drunk. David chuckled. When I last spoke here, the message I gave was of encouragement and support to this organisation and the vital role it plays. Of all of the challenges Eastern Merkapur and the whole world has faced since then, one has grown larger and more imminent than any other. The threat of the so-called socialist states and the actions taken by their authoritarian rulers with no regard to international law. A loud noise came from the table of Valgsland, and I saw Emmerich Hegel pounding his fists on his table in protest. Boo! Boo! Righto, keep watching. Today the need to come together as the leaders of the free world is more important than ever. The CSP, under the leadership of United Kontana, has been fueling Valgsland's military-industrial complex and its expansionist aims in eastern Merkapa. The world turned a blind eye when the armies of Valgsland occupied Helgeland, and they did not stop there. According to our intelligence reports, United Kontana-made nuclear missiles were quickly deployed to the island. Oh hell, lads, that's not good. He pulled out a photograph. Even though it was hard to see from my position, I recognised it as an aerial image of Helgeland. We demand that the Chancellor speak the truth. As you can all see, we have evidence of the construction of silos. Shit, this is huge. Exactly. If that's true, it's a threat to all of us. I didn't expect them to be so quick after their operation. David looked concerned. No Eastern Merkapin nation can accept the installation of weapons of mass destruction in the middle of our Markian Sea. Emmerich Hagel stood up and kept pounding his fists. We hereby call for the immediate dismantling and withdrawal of all missiles and other offensive weapons from Helgeland. We invite all the member states to support our call for a resolution in accordance with Article 11 of the Falenko Treaty. A lot of noise came from the Assembly Hall in response. Most of the Western Merkapin delegates were clapping, while others either shouted in protest or sat in stony silence. Well, if everyone's this worked up, then obviously this forum actually means something, right? It's not just a talk shop. Let us also not forget about the recent events that transpired in another state with socialist teachings, a state that wages war against its own innocent citizens. Valen. Right, innocent citizens. He's forgetting the violence of the BFF. Yeah, I'm just going to skip that one, I reckon. The purge of the minorities in their country was again largely ignored by the international community. I would go as far as to call it a genocide. Shit, lads. That means we're on the hook for ignoring it, if that's what they're trying to paint it as. Because we can't go against them in the public arena, seeing as they're a major supporter of ours. Valen violated our past treaties and mobilised their armed forces, deploying them close to our borders and authorising them to partake in massacres. Lesbia was affected not only by the large wave of refugees coming from Valen, but by the subsequent government seizure of all of our companies that were active in the country. We hereby call the member states to action against Valen and its rogue government. Alright, clap, yep. We support Lesbia. He walked back to his seat amidst enthusiastic applause from most of the Merkapin delegates. President Nunez waited for the noise to calm down and invited the next president, the Speaker of Valen, Victor Schmolak. Schmolak stood up. As he walked past Patricio Alvarez, he brushed him aside with an exaggerated sweep of his arms. When he reached the podium, he fumbled with the microphone for a few seconds. Then he smiled at Alvarez mockingly as he raised to the height of it. I think the real chaos will start now. Mr. President, he turned his back to us and stared out into the hall for a few seconds. Fellow delegates, it is true that the world today faces a multitude of challenges. In the midst of these challenges, the world's most powerful leaders gather here in Cairo. And what do? They make threats, promote hatred, and spread lies. Is this the alliance of nations we all want? Where is the cooperation and friendship? Where is the unity? I want to remind you of the wars that the West fought on our soil, of the foreign troops who occupied our country and seized our valuable resources. I want to remind you how they stole the oil from our sacred soil, and they did not know when to stop. The ATO soldiers left, but their interference never ceased. They financed armed rebel groups whose only purpose is to create terror inside our country. So, fellow degenerates, delegates, don't you dare speak about Valen before you acknowledge your involvement in our civil war, before you acknowledge your own dark past. Oof. Yeah, that's an empty argument. It doesn't justify what Valen did. Well, what did you expect, Mr. President? It's President Schmolak. As is well known, after the tremendous tragedy of the Valen Civil War, Arcasia made a deal with United Contana where they agreed upon the withdrawal of their troops along with the removal of half of the army. Not only did they weaken us, we were left alone in facing the genocidal Bludish Freedom Front, which Ato funds together with Rumburg. Just like the delegate before me, I will show you some of the evidence of foreign interference. He picked up a large stack of papers and waved them back and forth. I have clear evidence of direct aid from Rumburg to the Bludish Freedom Front. They smuggled tons of AK-47s in Valen. They smuggled in their spies, smuggled in mercenary commanders. These documents will be published everywhere. Copies have already been sent to the investigative affairs of the Alliance of Nations. I expect the organisation to do its task and investigate this properly instead of leaving Valen behind as they have always done. Coming back to the claims of the lesbian representative, first, there is no evidence of civilian massacres by the Vizek forces, nor so-called purges of minorities. Second, the operation was limited only to the militant BFF, not the Bloods in general. Third, we know your government is also implicated in the funding of the BFF, and that your oil companies aided their militants during the operation. Fourth, as the state, we only took what was ours. The companies the delegate spoke of were not only aiding militants, they were brought to Valen by force. Knowing that Valen will no longer recognise the right of any other country to determine what type of weapons we are permitted to possess, or what type of policies we follow within our borders. Valen stands together and more united than ever. Our people have spoken. The enemies inside our borders are crushed. Now I ask every delegate here to read our report on the connections of the West with the armed militants in eastern Merkapa, and I ask the Alliance of Nations to do what is right. Valen only wants peace. Our people want peace. They are counting on the support and understanding of all the nations of the world. Their proclamation is Free Valen or Death. Oh yeah. Damn, that was a strong speech. It will certainly be remembered. Victor slowly walked back to his seat as he applauded himself. He saluted the Rican delegates as he passed them. Next, President Nunez invited Martin van Herten to the podium. He walked up to the microphone with quick steps. He was frowning and clenching his fists. I could almost see his jaw trembling. Uh-oh, it's Helgeland time. Mr. President, fellow delegates of the Assembly and friends, it is an honour to be with you today. I wish we could meet under different circumstances, but once again the CSP nations, and in particular Valgsland, have shown us what they are willing to do to achieve their political aims. I must sadly say the world has left us alone. We were one of the first nations to propose proper cooperation between Eastern Mercapan nations, yet when we were threatened by Valgslandian expansionism, nobody came to our side. Although Mr. Alvarez voiced his indirect support for us earlier in today's session, I can't help myself from wondering where he was when our lands were under invasion by the very socialists he spoke about. So here I am asking for the support of the fellow member states of the Alliance of Nations. Ignolia is under attack by Valgsland. A loud banging noise emerged from the table of the Valgslandian delegates. All of them were pounding their fists on the table. Those delegates need to learn some respect, that's for sure. Mr. President, please moderate the Assembly. This is more than disrespectful. Emmerich Hegel began shouting curses as Nunez repeatedly banged his gavel for order. After a minute of back and forth shouting, the noise settled and Nunez allowed Martin to continue. As you all know, Helgeland, which had been a territory of Agnolia for more than 3 decades, was invaded by Valgsland in a sudden attack. Not only did they unlawfully occupy our land, they brought nuclear missiles to the island the moment our forces retreated. Millennievous terror surrounds us on all sides. We must not falter. I invite all member states to find a resolution in accordance with Article 11 of the Falenko Treaty, enforcing the immediate dismantling of all missiles from Helgeland. So we're going to support this one, because we definitely don't want Volkslandian missiles. Let's have a look at the territory again. So, I mean, Volkslandian missiles are no closer to us if they're stationed in Helgeport than if they're stationed in Volksland. But nevertheless, you know, given that they're aligned with the enemy, we want to beat them with every stick we can find. I must also remind you that under Article 3 of the Ventry City Treaty, the Alliance of Nations must ensure the withdrawal of the occupying force from the island. I call the democratic world to action against the tyranny of millennialism, authoritarianism, militarism, and extremism. The banging noise started again. Hegel stood up and approached the rostrum. You're a spineless jerk, a lackey of Arcasian imperialism. So, one of the things is, if there's a war in Helgersland here, that will keep the Volkslandian forces occupied. So, one of the rules is you don't start a new war until you've finished the old one. So long as they're occupied here, at this balance of power, theoretically they won't have the time to be able to come and threaten us. So, to the degree that it's possible to prevent a solid victory, we should be able to keep a proxy war going, right? If we can stealthily support Agnolia such that the war continues, that will serve our interests overall. We've got the option to speak up in support of Van Houten. Look at that old man go. What does he think he's doing? I think I'm going to do that. And the reason why is because we haven't done any favours to Agnolia recently. We didn't support them during the war. We didn't give them a trade treaty, and they kind of seem a bit pissed off with us anyway. But the call that they've made for support from democratic nations could be worthwhile. I don't necessarily want to make an enemy out of the Volkslandians, but the Volkslandians are kind of our enemy anyway, just because they're aligned with our political opponents, independent of whatever the actual, whatever the actual ins and outs are. So let's do that. Yeah, give him the strong version. Let him speak. What are you so afraid of? You won't even let him finish. You have no right to intervene. Know your place, President Rain. President Nines smacked his gavel in vain as a shouting match broke out in the assembly. After a few minutes, the other Volkslandian delegates convinced Hegel to sit back down. I believe I don't need to speak more about this subject. Everything is as clear as day. Mr. Hegel's actions speak volumes about the reality of Volksland and their corrupted ideology. I hope to see this conflict resolved with the help of the Alliance of Nations soon. He quickly left the podium and nodded to the other Agnolian delegate. The two left the assembly hall. President Nines announced the next speaker, Emmerich Hegel. Hegel immediately took his place and spoke in a low, seething tone. Thank you. David, buckle up. It's the Chancellor's time now. Looks like you're having fun, Mr. President. First of all, I want to extend a due welcome to the new states from Riga that have joined this organisation. After fighting for years against colonialism and imperialism, they more than earned their membership vote. I am overjoyed to see them finally represented in this assembly. As our numbers grow and more states are represented in this stage, we come ever closer to finding resolutions to the conflicts that plague us. For hundreds of years, the dominant economies of Merkapa razed, pillaged and exploited the continents of Riga and Zina. Sadly, Volksland was also a part of this plunder in the years before the revolution, when it still clung to the idea of imperialism. But when our masses found their voice, the old colonial powers and their new financiers turned against them. These powers did whatever they could to hamper our revolutions. They did not want the people to be heard. They are scared of us for showing the possibility of a better path. Of course they don't want us to succeed. We threaten the productivity that runs on the blood and sweat of their working class. And now they have started labelling us the aggressors. Yet we all know that it was the Arcasians who built up military bases all around Merkaba. It was the Ato that first formed to fight against millennialism. Bullshit. You think so? He's not entirely wrong. Helgeland was, is, and will be Valkslandian territory. Our intervention in the island was completely justified. Mr. Delegates brought up the Falenko and Ventry city treaties. However, they are forgetting about the Treaty of Constantinople. Valksland exercised its right to intervene on behalf of our people, who were being oppressed and massacred by the Agnolian government just because they did not recognise an appointed governor. They didn't go get to elect one. We acted in full accordance with the second article of the treaty. If there's a side to be blamed, it is the state which murders its minorities for publicly showing support to our nation. There were also claims about illegal missiles. No country in the world has the right to determine what type of weapons we import. If there's a conflict the Alliance can resolve, let's start with the Arcasian base on Falenko Island. Lesbia has been housing Arcasian troops and missiles by our border for years, and none of the member states even talked about it. Where's this Flamenco Island? Ravnos. Duru. Galb. Dunno. I also want the member states to look into the Arcasian bases in Lesbia. And if the Alliance of Nations truly claims to have the people's best interests at heart, they cannot stay silent about what the Agnolian people did in Helgeland, how they took away the rights of our people. Perhaps then there can be proper dialogue between our nations, and the Alliance of Nations can finally demonstrate that it can serve its intended purpose. But unfortunately, the Alliance of Nations remains all too willing to overlook such human rights violations. However, the Valkslandian government is ready as always to fight the forces of oppression and colonial servitude on behalf of free people everywhere. How incredibly noble. E Revolution Vezkor. Was that Sordish? Did I catch that right? He said the revolution will come, yes, but it was in Old Valgish. Very similar to Sordish, right? Some words are even written the same way, but I'm surprised you caught that from his accent. Most of the delegates from Xena, Rika and Contana responded with thunderous applause. Hegel shook hands with them as he walked back to his seat. President Nunez announced the next speaker, Queen Beatrice Livingston. Alright, here's the real enemy, lads. Dear President of the Assembly, dear delegates, dear leaders of the world, just as my fellow Eastern Mercapan delegates spoke about the troubles plaguing our continent, I also have to bring attention to a growing threat in our region, Swordland. We've got them pissing themselves now, lads. As you know, not long ago, Swordish aircraft with offensive capabilities were spotted inside our borders. A few days later, they shot down one of our planes inside our own airspace. It was practically an act of war. Know this, Rumburg will do anything in its power to defend itself and its interests, whether Swordland is actually planning something or not. Our Swordish neighbours and what they've been doing is very concerning. They took in traitors and gave them protection. Their president even went so far as to blame our country for spying on his administration through his own private secretary, and he expects the world to believe his lies. Mr. President, point of order. Nunez overruled my objection and told me to wait for the Queen to finish speaking. I hereby invite all of you to determine the initiation of a proper intergovernmental investigation into Swordland. If the Alliance continues to shirk its given duties, you can trust in Rumburg to take matters into her own hands. It is also important to point out that Rumburg will not stand idly by if more Contanan and Arcasian military are transferred to Eastern Merkaba. I hereby condemn both the CSP and ATO for trying to influence our region with their military power. That is a major blunder. If Rumburg manages to alienate both the CSP and ATO, they'll be completely isolated from the international community, which means we might actually be able to go on the offensive, or at the very least put them in check so we never have to worry about their attacks. That would be great. We can really put the boot in. Before I finish, I also want to say, Mr. Schmolak, I'm looking forward to reading your report. I wonder what this so-called evidence is all about. Know that your slander does not work on us. Know that we are ready to die for our freedom. Know that our kingdom stands firm and strong. Expect a grand awakening. Thank you. That was the worst speech I've ever heard. Mr. Anton Rain, President of Swordland, I invite you to address the Assembly. Oh, my time has come, lads. Right. Ladies and gentlemen, I walked up to the rostrum and took my place at the podium. In front of me were some of the most powerful leaders in the entire world. I looked them in the eyes. Okay, what do we got? Thank you, Mr. President and fellow delegates. It's an honour to be here, dear members of the Assembly. The representation of Swordland is pleased to address this Assembly. That's good, because that doesn't commit us to... it's ambiguous, right? We're talking to them because we are pleased to have the opportunity to fill them in on everything they're wrong, maybe? Or maybe, we're just, respecting the actual formal institution. Anybody who ascends this rostrum must appreciate what a significant gathering he is addressing. The speakers who have preceded me have expressed their concern about their problems. Swordland remains committed to the alliance of nations and the ideals that gave birth to it. There we go. Yet we know how often the noble ideals embodied in this charter remain unfulfilled and concerns unheard. Our century is the century of the struggle for freedom. Our people are still not free from fear. Our world is faced with the dangers of division, the dangers of large military alliances and nuclear arms races. Now is more important than ever to set aside our differences and unite under this charter. It's time to ask the hard questions. Today we are confronted with a difficult choice. Our great achievements may either be used for the benefit or the detriment of mankind. Now I'd like to address some of the topics mentioned here today. Yes, I would like to do that. It was claimed that Valen was involved in a genocide. Such strong words shouldn't be spoken without proper evidence. That is the thing that I would like to say, but I can't do that because I can't alienate the lesbians. So I'm just going to go with number 2. We are deeply saddened by the tragic events that took place in Valen. Swordland stands together with the Vizek people. Nope. We will continue our cooperation with Valen. No. I have to admit the operation resulted in many unnecessary deaths. Well, I don't want to say any of those things. Alright, we'll continue our cooperation. That's pretty hypocritical. Alright. I'm going to go with number 3. Because that's not going all the way to admitting that a genocide took place. Because we don't actually know if that's the case or not. But it does seem like that there was unnecessary deaths. So this is true. Yeah, it has the advantage of being true. Okay, I would also like to extend my support to Mr. Van Herten. Swordland stands together with Agnolia. The delegate from Agnolia is correct. We can't let the CSP install nuclear missiles right next to our homes. That's correct. Swordland will do everything to crush the Millennialist threat. Swordland will do whatever it takes to make sure the aggressors will never achieve their aims. Swordland will do whatever it takes to achieve peace in Eastern Merkaba. That's right. Hagel pounded his fists on the table again. Peace, you achieve nothing. You're a puppet of Arcasia. Responds to Emmerich Hagel. Mr. Chancellor, have some respect. Next, I would like to address the cream of Runberg. Alright, she talked about some hypothetical threat that our nation poses to Eastern Merkaba, while Rumberg's military has tripled in the last decade. Yeah, that's good. Accuse them of being hypocrites. That's definitely worthwhile. The real threat to Eastern Merkaba has always been Rumberg. Today it is still the case. Also true. Swordland always wanted to have peace between our nations, yet we are being threatened by Rumberg. Yeah. Well, Rumberg's military has tripled in the last decade. That seems like the strongest of the options. It was Rumberg who shot at our aircraft within our airspace. We only defended our borders. That's right. Good. We also have some evidence to show to the Assembly. Mr. Smolak was right. Swordland only wanted peace, not baseless accusations and threats. If Rumburg continues its aggression, Swordland will be ready. Alright, I don't know if we ever actually have any evidence or not, but that's not really important right now. What's important is that we need to smash Rumburg diplomatically as hard as we can. We discovered that many militant groups in Swordland were being financed or armed by Rumburg. That's correct. And there's another important piece of evidence we have, provided to us by someone close to the Rumburgian government. Okay, that looks like a good option. I hereby call on the Alliance of Nations to serve its duty. Rumburg and its links to rebel groups must be properly investigated. I hereby call on the Alliance of Nations to support Swordland. We are facing an existential threat. Ooh, all good options. Existential threat? Possibly. Rumburg and its links to the rebel groups must be properly investigated. Yeah, an investigation is not really the kind of... doesn't really have the strength that I would like to deploy against them. What I really want to do is isolate them from the entire international community, if at all possible. So driving a wedge between them and the CSP would be ideal. None of these options really achieve that outcome, but we'll be alert to opportunities later on. There is another important piece of evidence that we have provided to us by someone close to the Rumburgian government. Alright, don't know what that is, let's see. According to our reports, Rumburg has been building its own nuclear weaponry. Mr. Hailstone was branded as a traitor in Rumburg for blowing the whistle on the country's hidden nuclear facilities. There we go. Bam. I hereby call on the Alliance of Nations to serve its duty. Rumburg and its nuclear facilities must be properly investigated. Yep. Excellent. There we go. That's a good investigation. Thank you for listening to our concerns. I wish to see a resolution from the AN soon. The AN can no longer fail to ignore the machinations of the enemies of peace. Yeah, good. We stand and always will stand for the rights of the people of Swordland and Eastern Merkaba, just as those in other continents. Also good. If the right actions are not taken, it will be quite evident that international relations cannot continue on such a basis. Alright, I think number one is the strongest. Long live the Alliance of Nations, unity and peace. There cannot be any more procrastination or delay. The AN must adopt decisions according to the wishes of the people of the world. Yeah, that's the one I'm going for. The people of Swordland and I are honoured to have expressed our concerns before this noble assembly. Number two it is. Peace in Merkaba, peace in the world. Fantastic. Patricio Alvarez, well spoken. I heard thunderous applause from half of the assembly. Great. Raise your fist. Alright. How was it? Not a bad speech, Mr. President. Alright, I think it was a bit better than that, bud. Mr. President, I first want to congratulate you on your election to this high office. Mr. Secretary, delegates of the Alliance of Nations, ladies and gentlemen, and fellow friends. Who's Dwight Walker? Arcasian politician and businessman. Alright, we meet again on our quest to bring peace and light into this world, but even though some of the clouds have lifted, the world has not yet escaped the darkness. The Kontanan Security Pact is rapidly expanding its influence. It's very troubling to see a democratic nation of Merkaba be invaded by those millennialist powers. I will refer, of course, to Helgeland's occupation by Valgsland. This is an attack against the lasting peace the world has enjoyed since the century of revolutions. Today our peacekeeping obligations are being tested by United Kontana and the millennialist bloc. If we fail to counter and stop this threat, if we stay idle and allow them to build new walls and weapons of hostility, if the attackers do not face any consequences, then this unstable peace we believed we had built will be the world's downfall, and posterity will point its finger at us for not stopping it. Emmerich Hegel and the other Valgslandian delegates started making noise again. This time, Hegel had taken off his shoe and was banging the table with it. What a muppet. I have no words. The Chancellor has gone mad. It's getting ridiculous. He's not even ashamed at his age. Despite its claims, the CSP's actions will only bring about war. We believe United Kontana and Arcasia, together with our allies, could come to an understanding for our mutual benefit and our desire to avoid the destruction of the world. Yet United Kontana keeps attacking in complete disregard to international law. Their allies are forcefully taking land and imposing their own values on the people of those lands. I will say this to the leaders of United Kontana. If either of us is to be secure, we need a peaceful cooperation, not nuclear missiles, shows of naval superiority, or invasions. So I'm going to absolutely support this, obviously. We want to make it diplomatically that we're trying to be the good guys. But having said that, I will build up as many nuclear missiles as I possibly can as soon as I can. Because we need a nuclear defence in order to be able to erect a nuclear balance of power against the Rumburgians. Because if they get nukes, we don't have them, then even with ATO at our back, we could still lose a conflict, right? They could invade and then ATO could choose not to assist us because of the potential for a nuclear war. If the leaders of United Kontana fail to demilitarise Helgeland with complete dismantling of the nuclear missiles and the withdrawal of occupying Volkslandian forces, ATO will have to take matters into our own hands. Hegel stood up with the shoe in his hand. What is that supposed to mean? You're promoting war in the Alliance of Nations? Mr. President, this... Silence, please. Mr. Chancellor, please let me finish. We did not interrupt you when you addressed the Assembly. I must also raise my concerns about the threat that Rumburg poses to Eastern Merkaba. Nice. The speakers who preceded me clearly show that tensions are rising. The reports from Valen and Swordland are troubling. The representatives from both countries referred to AK-47s being smuggled within their borders. Mr. Rain also pointed out the construction of nuclear weaponry in Rumburg. Our intelligence also confirms this. Arcasia and the ATO will stand against the aggression of Rumburg. They are playing a dangerous game, one that may bring ruin to Merkaba and their own lands. I believe the Alliance of Nations can find a resolution to this conflict as well. If not, let it be known that Arcasia will stand together with Swordland. Rumburg cannot do as it pleases. It's good to have strong allies, I tell you what. Do you think Rumburg can pursue any more aggression after that statement? I doubt that. With our membership in ATO and Arcasia's clear support, the Queen needs to be crazy to try anything. Nice, that secures our position. I think that analysis is probably accurate, so I'm going to lean on it. Finally, I propose that the Alliance of Nations undertake the noble cause of helping the people of the world through rewriting and properly enforcing its Human Rights Declaration. The Alliance of Nations cannot survive as a static organisation. Its size and duties are increasing enormously. It should adapt to the changing world. But peace and rights do not rest in the hands of this organisation alone. They rely on the hearts of our people and the spirit of cooperation between our nations. So let it be known, my fellow inhabitants of this world, let us take our stand and see if we can finally achieve a lasting peace. Thank you. Most of the Assembly applauded the speech, the ATO delegates in particular. Hear, hear. Hear, hear. Fantastic. Hear, hear. Stand up and applaud the speech. That's what I'm going to do. The applause continued for some time. Walker shook hands with various delegates on his way back to his seat. President Nines announced the last speaker before the break, Leon Malenev. Malenev. Can we get a picture of him? Yeah, this is the guy that invented the variety of communism, right? Alright. Malenev slowly walked up to the rostrum in his iconic suit. All of the CSP delegates stood up and applauded him. Honourable Chairman and fellow delegates of the Alliance of Nations, here we are again at the most esteemed meeting of state representatives in the world. However, increasingly we're being threatened, disregarded, attacked or ignored in this assembly. The representative of Arcasia has just shown this unfriendly attitude towards us yet again. Arcasia would have you believe we are standing in the way of lasting peace, yet the peace they talk about was only possible thanks to our missiles and our growing base in the developing world. The ATO kept waging wars against people's revolutions and forcing new independent states to be their puppets, binding them to themselves through the Arcasian lira. Oh no. And now yet another Arcasian president is telling us that we are the aggressors and they are the keepers of peace. Yeah, that's right. We will not be silent anymore against these lies. When was the peace you talked about? Where was the cooperation between our countries? Have you ever accepted our invitation to talk about denuclearization? If you don't like us, don't accept our deals, don't listen to our concerns, and keep pointing fingers at us, why did you invite us to the Alliance of Nations? Every year, United Kontana comes to this assembly to address the real problems of real people, people who suffer because of your systems, your wars, and your ignorance. What a jerk-off this guy is. Jesus. Whether or not you like it, we'll keep representing the labourers, the slaves, the oppressed of this world, and believe it or disregard it, history is on our side. We say to the representatives of capitalist countries, come and visit us, come and see the revolution working in Kontana. Show our continent to your people without distorting the reality. If you cannot do that, then you need not come. We believe socialism will triumph over capitalism in the end. Such is the logical conclusion of the development of humankind. This time, lesbian delegates started laughing very loudly, and some other delegates booed. Join in with the laughing. There we go. You can keep laughing, gentlemen. Communism will bury you. Yeah. If you really believe in cooperation, we will be waiting. We're not going anywhere. However, if the ATO keeps intervening in our matters, it is natural the CSP would react. Despite threats from ATO, Rumburg, or any other nation or organisation, we must not succumb to further division and violence. We must ask ourselves, what do the people of our countries expect of us? They surely don't want war and bloodshed. So let us leave to our children and grandchildren good memories of our time and a better future for all. Let them look at history and say, once there were great divisions and complex problems, but the leaders of the world came together in the Alliance of Nations and succeeded in settling them in order to ensure our peaceful lives. Yeah. What a load of smoke and mirrors, mate. Let us act in such a way to make this session not a session of threats, but a session of hopes and the realisation of them. The government of United Kontana and the United Peoples of Kontana are ready to serve their duties for world peace. Long live the People's Revolution. Don't react. The assembly broke into massive applause. The applause continued for some time. Meleniev slowly walked back to his seat as the president announced a break. That was a lot. Troubling. Tensions are too high. It's quite scary, to be honest. We need to be careful. Wowee, lads. Righto, what does the news have to say? Lesbia shows evidence of Volkslandian missiles in Helgeland. Chancellor Hagel's disgrace at the Alliance of Nations. And missiles of Helgeland. That's right. All big stuff. Ugh. Alright, what briefs have we got here? Opinion polls, alarming. With the election drawing near, our staff at the Maroon Palace has conducted polls all across Swordland. Our polls show that roughly 22% of Swordish citizens would vote for us in the upcoming election. 22%? That's pathetic. How can that possibly be after everything we've done? That is ridiculous. Alright. Opinion polls positive from Conriat. The election polls drawing near, staff at Maroon Palace has conducted polls across Swordland. Our polls show that the majority of Swordish citizens would likely vote for us in the upcoming election. Okay, interesting. And what does this one say? Roughly 40%. And these ones. ATO modernises Swordland Air Force. Oh, this is not opinion polls. Our generals have been working tirelessly along with their ATO counterparts to modernise our Air Force. The regiment's training have been changed to include more manoeuvring exercises as well as nighttime bombing training. Our warplanes have been retrofitted with the latest technology radar systems and cutting-edge bombs transported from Arcasia. General Staff report that the Swordish Air Force have never been in better condition. Fantastic. Alright, and what's this one? Report from Wholesword. The UN ambassador has extended their full support after the recent revelations about Rumburg on the international stage. Nice. Swordland has received a guarantee that the international community will stand by its territorial integrity and independence in these times. Well, that's very nice, but we'll see what happens when it actually kicks off. Private meeting with David Vishy. Don't think I'm quite ready for that one. Alright, that was quite a successful session, lads. I'm particularly... I'm happy with how that worked out. Overall, I would say, intuitively speaking, I think ATO has the edge over the CSP at the moment, and I'm definitely heartened by the possibility that there might be a wedge between CSP and Rumburg. If that happens, then we'll definitely have the advantage. I think our alignment with ATO is definitely paying off, both militarily and economically, obviously. What else do we need to debrief? Yeah, right. So, if Agnolia joins ATO, then we might step in and support them a little more. But we want to maintain the conflict here, right? We want Valksland to be tied up with these concerns here, as I said earlier, rather than having the opportunity... Because if they can clear this, that gives them a free hand. They can move into the Markian Sea and threaten us, which is definitely not what we want. So if we have to cause a proxy war... and then support Agnolia. Let me just put that a little more clearly. If Agnolia is not a part of ATO, then we will support them in their fight against Valksland. And we'll try to support them surreptitiously if we can, but if we can't and we just have to do it out in public, then that's fine. And if that turns into a kind of like a permanent low-grade proxy war that never quite gets resolved, so it ties up Valksland's resources, then that's definitely worthwhile doing. On the other hand, if Agnolia does join ATO, then we will be bound by our alliance to support them, and we will try, and then we will give them our support, out in the open, and that's fine. And similarly, but in that case, we'll try and have a stalemate instead of a conflict. Something like have this as a demilitarised zone. Alright, I'll talk to you next time, lads.